Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Ashley, and I'm so excited for this episode today. I have the honor of sharing this space with a very special guest, Nancy Gale. Nancy is the founder and designer of American luxury handbag brand JAMAH. She also founded Ambition, a nonprofit entrepreneur and mentor-driven program for disadvantaged youth on a mission to provide students with support and access and resources to achieve their potential. And I am inspired by her passion and admire her dedication, her resilience, and perseverance. She is living an incredible story. Her energy is contagious. And I'm saying it here that she's now stuck with me forever as a friend. So, with that, Nancy, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, and I feel the same way about you.
So, my heart behind this podcast is to create a space where our voices can be heard and stories can be shared, and really just serve as encouragement that what's building within us is far greater than the things that happen to us. So, you have these amazing stories from your professional and personal life. You have overcome many challenges and hardship, and you're proof that you don't have to be a victim of your circumstances. You really can do what you want to set out to do against all odds and really just be who you were created to be, especially when you're in it for the long haul. And so I know you have so much to share and give. And so to understand how you got to where you are today, can you take us back to the beginning of your journey when you were just 7 years old and moving to Detroit?
Yes. So we lived in Los Angeles, and I did not want to leave, even at 7. My dad used to make fun of me that I was absolutely convinced I could just stay out here and they could send food and give me a roof. And that, of course, didn't fly. So I begrudgingly went with my folks and my sister to suburbs of Detroit. And of course, I think when you have a great family and support system, you have a great life wherever you are. And it's really hard for that not to happen in my circumstances, living in the suburbs. And so life was it. If one looks back, my life looked very charmed and wonderful, and it was. And the things that I was confronted with, they were just my life, so they never felt like challenges. And when I was in 7th grade, my mom became very, very ill for the better part of 4 years. She was in the hospital for just about 2 years, in and out of a low-grade coma, and then she was in and out of the hospital for the next couple of years. But that was just my life. And I mean, I was so fortunate to have a family that also made sure that my life continued in the face of all that. So I think what I learned was to be inspired by life around me instead of saddened that people were going on in a way that I wasn't. And so I think that without even knowing it, that kind of set the groundwork for my independence, and it set the groundwork for my conviction and this sort of natural conviction that we can get through anything. And I always say, our challenges do not dictate our constitution. So I went through life thinking, I have this great life. I'm so fortunate. And when I was 25, at this point, I had graduated from college and was, doing my own thing. And when I was 25, I was raped walking down the street in a little, charming white picket area of New Hampshire. And I was raped and beaten, and I had such an interesting journey beyond that. I remember right after it happened, I was driving up the freeway, and back then, of course, there were no phones, so I listened to this one ad for the Rape Crisis Center. And it was really the only place that people had to go when something like this happened to him. This was in 1988. And I heard this sort of bellowing music, and it felt very dark and gothic, and you can hear a woman in the background. She's very shaky, and she says, I could never be with a man again after something like this happened to me. And I remember getting home and calling my folks, and I said, I feel like I'm being told how I'm supposed to respond to this, and I don't feel like that. I don't feel like a victim. I feel like I crossed the path of somebody who, I don't know where they were and are in this world, but that's the extent of my involvement in this. So I decided over time, well, if I feel like this, then other people can feel like this. And I would rather anyone who went through what I went through feel that way than feel like a victim and that they're to blame for this. Yet I also realized there's a great lesson from this, and it's in the decisions that we make. And interestingly, even when I say that, I always hear people say, well, that's not your fault. But I'm a champion of making better choices. And I have to say, a choice I wouldn't make again is at 10, 11 p.m. to walk by myself down a dark road to a little store. So anyway, I moved out to California shortly after, and I decided maybe I'll volunteer for the Rape Crisis Center. And I kept missing the mark with that. And I met someone who has a chain of self-defense schools, and he said, perhaps you can come talk to my audience, because most of them are here because they're afraid of something like this happening, or they have gone through something like this. So the first time I go to speak to this group of women, and this was game-changing for me and my path. There were about 60, 70 women in the room. We're all sitting on a big gymnasium floor on floor mats. And I asked the room, how many people here have experienced sexual assault or rape, and no hands go up. Maybe 2 or 3 sort of people get a little jilted by this. So I start telling the story of what happened to me. And I get to this crazy part of the story where, and I think it's I'm convinced for me, it's how my brain protected me. I was wearing this Pepe jean jacket, and I had just gotten it, and it was sort of, I managed to get it within days of it being released. And I was so excited about my Pepe jean jacket. So I'm lying in this brush. I'm cut. I'm bruised. I'm sore. My clothes are shredded. But I determine that there's enough evidence on me that if they don't have the Pepe jean jacket, that'll be fine. So I somehow get myself out of it. I roll over, and I now can hear sirens because someone's seen something and called the police. And I shove it under this brush because I'm going to come back the next day to get this jean jacket. And in the middle of this story, everybody starts to laugh. So right then, I said, remind me again who here has been sexually assaulted. And probably almost 30 hands go up. And what I realized in that moment is this isn't about someone making them comfortable. What happened is they laughed and they smiled. And I know this to be true. For the second that you smile, you cannot be sad. Not when it's a genuine, deep, gut-felt smile. And so that just never left me, what happened in that moment. And it just confirmed a lot of things in life for me, right? That it's about our attitude and our approach. And what I realized was, and I believe this so deeply, that we can hold 2 truths at once. We can face something incredibly challenging, yet our constitution remains unbroken. And I know for me, smiling helps to ensure that. So what I realized is I am always Happy Nancy. Whether in times of bliss or in times of challenge. And so that became sort of the construct for my life. And I've had so many conversations where people say to me, no one can be happy all the time. But I wake up happy. And it, again, does not mean I am not, at times burdened by my challenges. So taking this forward, a little over 10 years ago, my mother was murdered in a home invasion. Words one never expects to come out of one's mouth, at least not me. And I realized, though, because I'm so dedicated to making sure that I can assume and share happiness in this world, I realized even that is not going to take away my happiness. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to grieve. My mom was my favorite person in the world. She was just magical. But I knew the last thing she would want was for me to give up years of happiness because of this. So I realized to that point, I will be two things at once. No one will ever make me not be happy, Nancy. But for this patch of time, happy Nancy's going to grieve, and that will come and go. But this is now another component of my life. And I don't believe that all things happen for a reason. And I know it's semantics, but I think I used to be able to utter those words, but now I say have a parent murdered and see if you can still utter that. But I do believe that we have the opportunity in every single situation to say, what can I make from this? What good? How can I make something good from something so tragic? So for me, with my students from Ambition, it put me in a place that the students could now relate to me, because when I started the program, I'm the blonde, happy handbag designer. They'd Google me, they'd see me with celebrities, they know the prices of my products, and so it puts me in a very different space. But when this happened, they realized, wow, you look at somebody and you don't know about them. So that actually triggered a program for us called You Don't Know About Me, which is a really wonderful leadership program that we've been running in Ambition for over a decade now, and has become a staple to the program.
Well, first of all, I mean, there's so much there, and just really appreciate you sharing all of that. I think, one thing that we've talked about before, this kind of mentality that you have, this power, not pity, in the way that we, talk about our experiences and share our stories. And I think that's a big component of what you're doing with Ambition and You Don't Know About Me. So could you speak a little bit more to that and how that empowers the students there to share some of these, aspects about themselves?
Absolutely. So what we do with our students is we spend the first 3 months of the year, we're with our students from September to June, once a week. The entirety of the first semester is focused on our You Don't Know About Me's, which not only our students, but our mentors do. And an official You Don't Know About Me is you get on camera, and with power, not pity, and that's our mantra, power, not pity. You get on camera, you announce your greatest challenge. Most importantly, you share how you got through or are getting through it so that we can be all about progress and moving forward. And then you wrap it up with a humble flex. And the reason for the humble flex is so that, going back to the idea, right, that we are a multitude of things really at once. And so when you share something really challenging and then you get to have this throw in this humble flex, it empowers us. And that helps us with this whole mantra of power, not pity. And when we share something with strength, and going back to what happened to me in that room is when you share something with power and strength, then it makes people comfortable to say, oh gosh, I was there too. Because I think a lot of times people don't want to share because they don't want to be the victim. So if we hear things in this very, very heavy, dramatic, and I'm not saying all these things aren't heavy and dramatic, but if we can somehow go to the other side and show our power as opposed to our pity, then people join in and say, that happened to me. And then what happens when our students do this? They become leaders. And now they have other students wanting to share that they've been there. And the humble flex is so amazing too, because and I think it's made it much more comfortable for the kids, because they know the sort of the bonus or the prize at the end of sharing something so challenging is that they then get to share something that perhaps they want people to know, and they've never really been had the platform to be able to share that without feeling like they're bragging.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, yeah, just that whole approach, like you're saying too, I mean, people want to hear how you got from, how you overcame these challenges, right? And getting to these positions where now you are empowered to be a leader and to inspire the next generation in similar ways, that you're kind of going through. So I love that. And it's something that, in our first conversation just really stuck with me. And I think that, it's a great way to just kind of shift the conversation around the things that we go through and, and keep going. And that's a big theme of just, this whole project that I have in this space is those overcoming stories and the endurance that we do have within us to keep going. And so I want to ask you a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur and getting started with JAMAH and also Ambition, because initially you kind of started off as a technical writer. So could you take us through that whole journey, and then, when you made that decision to pursue this?
So when I was younger, I was always really intrigued and interested in fashion. And then when I graduated college, I started feeling like people didn't take me seriously, because sadly, the happy, bubbly, now blonde. In fact, I was actually at a meeting once, and I had a gentleman say to me, "Don't smile so much, people won't take you seriously." And I think back how sad that is, because I don't know how to not smile. Like it's the funniest thing for me. My natural, I guess my resting face is to smile, because it makes me feel joyful. So I'm in this world of wanting to pursue, I wasn't sure if it was fashion at that point or marketing, but something creative, and it just, the response I was getting in the world was, people won't recognize your intellect if you go into those fields. And I was experiencing something that was really interesting too. I would meet somebody, I'd have a conversation with them, and halfway through the conversation I'd hear this: "Wow, you are really well spoken. I didn't expect you to be this intelligent." And I thought, wow, isn't that crazy? What makes one, is it a look? Is it a personality? I never thought the two were connected. And so I thought, I'm going to go into a field that's serious, and that is the way I will get people to take me seriously. So by a weird fluke, I don't even, looking back, have any idea how I wound up there, but I became a technical writer. And it was just not me. I was very good at it, but it was not me. And I was trying to figure out, where my passions lie, what that looks like. And I realized over time, it's definitely something in the creative and fashion. And just ended up working with a gal where we started JAMAH, and initially we were doing high-end gifting in the entertainment industry. And that was interesting because we were making our own products, so I was in factories, but something still wasn't really resonating for me. So we went our separate ways, and in the early 2000s, I realized I want to be in the fashion industry, but on the peripheral, and I want to be super high-end luxury, because that was something that I felt the the word on the street was that is all reserved for European brands, which was growing up, spending 10 years of my formative years in Detroit, with the the Motor City and with architecture. It just was so strange to me that fashion wasn't really brought into that circle. So I thought at some point in this world, people will care about American-made fashion, really high-end fashion. And handbags for me were really intriguing and interesting because really a bag, right, all it does is carry your stuff. But you can make something like this so luxury, so important to wear. It changes the way it changes your posture. It changes the way you stand. You can throw it on any outfit and it's the game changer. So I thought that's what I'm going to be, is the first true luxury American made USA design house, or handbag design house. And so I just went toward that. And boy, I hit just one dead end after the other in terms of people telling me this can't be done. There will never be another big house. Nobody cares about USA fashion. Do what everybody else is doing. It's too expensive. And I kept thinking, well, the more our products leave this country, the more comfortable we get with the idea that things should not cost a certain amount of money. So then, little by little, it seemed ludicrous. But just the way the world cycles, I knew that if I stuck with this, one day it would matter again. And we're now at that time that it matters again. So what's been really exciting for me is looking back and realizing I stuck to the idea and I didn't let anybody take me down. One of the ways that I endured that and all the naysaying was just by quietly agreeing with everybody and smiling and then walking away, doing my turnaround and just saying, I know I can do this. And I've found some incredible support. I've obviously, which has made all the naysaying easier and easier, and the more successful and recognized the brand has become, the more fun it's kind of been to say, ha. But 3 years ago, or almost 4 years ago, I launched a motor car collection. So I took this sort of idea of luxury and put it on steroids, and now we are super, super custom. We do personal inscriptions, love letters on the inside of our bags. We do video of your bag being made. And now I work with really high-end car owners making bags that reflect the car, but are still beautiful bags when you're away from the car. So in the midst of this idea of doing something that everybody said couldn't be done, I decided I'll add a leg to it that's also never been done. Because I think when you're crazy, you just grow more crazy. And then I think it became so much fun to defy what everybody said would happen, that I ended up using all that as fuel to move forward. And I feel like that's the thing I would tell anybody. When you dig in and you are committed to your idea, and it does, believe me, I had a rough 10, 12 years, but I just stuck with it because I think when you do your homework, so I looked at all the really high-end brands, the big houses, the European houses. They weren't in business 20, 30, 40 years before people knew who they were. So, but here I am, right, in the years of fast fashion and everybody, overnight successes. So I just stuck with it and I did it my way. And I say, 23 years later, we started really hitting. And tomorrow will actually be 25 years.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's so exciting.
And then regarding ambition, in 2010, I kept thinking, I grew up with a lot of access and exposure, and it started to dawn on me that's the real difference, right, between the haves and the have-nots. So what happens to people who don't grow up or didn't grow up at my dinner table? Where do they get that access? Where do they get that exposure? And I thought, I think that's what I need to add to my brand is a nonprofit, and not at all in the cause and cause marketing way, but just I want something that if the brand is successful, we can really, really support, because I knew that would drive me. And I thought I want to start a program that's mentor driven. And over the time, and so I started this February 22nd, 2010. We're going to be 15 years in a few weeks. And the program is really about giving these kids access, exposure, and the best way to do that is really getting to know the kids. And then the one thing that I knew that, I figured, every student, boy, girl, doesn't matter what they want to do in their future, they're all going to benefit from learning marketing. So that's what we focus on. We have a brand within Ambition. But really, at the end of the day, Ambition is about us giving these kids access and exposure. If they don't get anything from the program tangibly, they will get that.
Yeah, and can you share some of the just some of the stories of the students that?
Yes.
But yeah, I would love that, because I know there's a lot of good stuff that's happening, and I would love for you to just share some of those stories.
So one of our first big stories was the students wanted to meet Richard Branson. So we decided, or I decided back then, everything they want will turn into a marketing project. So I said, if you want to meet him, you have to do a few things. You have to study him. You have to put a pitch together. We're going to go into video or film the pitch. And the pitch can't be, hey, we want to meet you. The pitch really, in light of teaching them marketing, is to convince him that he's missing out if he doesn't meet them. So we put this pitch together. I send it to some people I know. We post it on social media. I just met someone at Virgin. I sent this video to her, and sure enough, he happened to be in town the next day and was excited and said, I want to meet the students. So we hit the ground running. We had just started Ambition, and this concept was just sort of, I kind of came out of the dark, like, let's make campaigns, because typically, right, when those things happen, you start reaching out to your people and saying, hey, can we possibly get that person in front of the kids? But putting it all on them, I also knew if this happened, they'd have a much better conversation with him because they did this. So, honestly, in 48 hours, we're sitting at the Sunset Marquee with Richard Branson. In fact, they called and said he'd love to come to the school, and I said, we want to always take these kids, and it's a phrase actually, we're partnering with Boys and Girls Club now, but they always say we want to take these kids beyond the wall. I didn't know this then, but that was definitely my concept, is no, let's bring them into a place that they're not used to going. And that set the standard for us. And we did this a number of times with different people over the years. One of the most successful ones, I shared this story with you, was David Henry, who was on Wizards of Waverly Place. The kids were obsessed with him. And, they know him through reruns. So we do the same thing. They put together this great video. We get it to him, in front of him. He wants to come to class. So we have this really fabulous setup. The kids, they all show up. It's 8 o'clock Wednesday morning at the time. And they're on he explains that he can't be there in person because he's in Paris, but he's really excited to be on Zoom. Or actually, we did FaceTime. He's really excited about that. So the kids are in a big horseshoe. They're all prepared. We've got about 50 people in the room. And he comes on, and there's just so much excitement. And then, unfortunately, we lose reception. So I tell the kids, he texted me as soon as he's through this tunnel. he will be back online. So we said to the kids, hey, let's just get up and do jumping jacks and get the room, like get energy in the room for when he calls again. So they all get up, they're doing jumping jacks, and unbeknownst to the students, he and my husband are around the corner. And they just slithered into the room and joined the jumping jacks. And little by little, the kids all start spotting him and went crazy. We had the most remarkable 90 minutes with him. And then at the end, the greatest thing was the kids saying, oh my gosh, we saw today that we can make our dreams come true. And our whole approach with these students is, you want it, you got to work your ass off. You do the work, you put the time in, and you can make things happen. And I mean, for me, it took 25 years. For these kids, it took us about a month to get to him. But that is the best lesson of all of it, right? When you dig in, and sometimes the gold doesn't come in the order or the time or the way that we expect it. But it always does. Mm-hmm.
So good.
Yeah, so that was pretty incredible.
It is. And then going beyond that, I know there's a student that, you're close with that then, can you talk a little bit about the confidence that, is instilled so then, as they're growing and getting older and they're into these rooms, with others and they're exploring opportunities. Yeah, some of those conversations that have been had and things like that.
Well, one of my favorite stories is we had a student named Yessie, and she used to sit in the back of the room kind of coiled up next to her best friend Leslie and just didn't want to speak. And we got her to do her You Don't Know About Me, and discovered that when she was in third grade, she came home to find ice at her house. Her father was being deported. And she kind of shut down at that point, especially like emotionally and in her education. And after we got her You Don't Know About Me, and she saw the response, it was absolutely the most beautiful thing. She told the story so powerfully. And about a month later, she calls me and she texts me and she said, you need to call me right away. So I called her and she said, oh my gosh, I'm at this place. It's called, and it was sort of funny, she said, Deloitte and Tush. And I said, oh, you're at Deloitte and Tush. She said, yes, that's it. And she said, but you'll never believe what just happened. I saw Uncle Ken, and this was one of our mentors at the time, and she said, he's here for a meeting. She said, you'll never believe what I did. And I said, what'd you do? And she said, I walked over to him, and he was with about 8 or 10 associates. And I walked right up there, and I said, hello, Ken. And then I shook everybody's hand, and I introduced myself. That was absolutely monumental for this sweet little gal that sat in the back of our room and didn't want to speak. So she's now has graduated college, and she's down in her career path, and she is confident and beautiful in every way, and we've remained very close, as we have with many students. We have another student, Mia, who she's like family to us. And we used to joke with her. We used to say, we thought you were going to burn the school down. And she'd say, yeah, I think some days I wanted to burn the school down. But she saw my You Don't Know About Me. And her father was sadly shot and killed. And that connected us in a way. She was, she'd come into the room. She didn't want to be there. She was sort of just angry. And she would say, I can change the face of a room. And then she did her You Don't Know About Me. And we saw the most incredible beauty and depth and intelligence and intellect in this amazing young woman who, same thing, now she's almost 30 years old. She just had a baby. She's just this amazing human. And so we get to witness all of this, and we get to be a little fly on the wall and hopefully offer something that at least tells them, if we don't give them the opportunity, it's out there for them if they want to step up and do the work. Which sounds like such an obvious sentence, but in the world right now, it's not. We're dealing with a lot of conversations where we say, when you say do the work, that's pressuring kids, and so but what we've discovered is, again, if you don't know the kids, you cannot teach them. So if we spend the first semester, again, week after week, and our mentors come week after week, and we really get to know the kids, it's a game changer.
So
No curriculum works the way it does when you really know who you're applying that to.
And that's why too, I mean, you spoke before about people saying that keeping the mentors there would be a big challenge.
Yeah.
And it's proved to be something that hasn't been.
Not at all. Yeah,
And I
was,
think, yeah, and that goes to, right, I mean, you can speak to this, but just that connection, and that time spent in being immersed there and really, engaged with what's happening and seeing those tangible impacts. And it keeps those people, it keeps them there and wanting to show up.
That's exactly it. And it's so interesting because I remember when I was sharing that with you, I shared a story about one of our students years and years ago when I asked all our students, and he was sort of the spokesperson, what happens when someone comes to speak in class? And they'll say, oftentimes someone comes, they give us great information, but what we also know is they go home and they tell a lot of folks that they helped a bunch of poor kids. And they put that all over social media. But when they keep coming back, we know they're there for us. And so our mentors are required to come once a month. Almost everyone comes just about every week. And we've discovered that there's like serious FOMO, because when you miss a week and you come back and you see other mentors getting closer with other kids, you don't want to have to miss any of that. And I think when you're starting something like this, sort of same thing as when I was starting JAMAH and everybody telling me exactly that you won't be able to retain mentors. People will get too busy. I think what you have to do with all of that information is just shut it out. And I thought I'll find a way to do that differently. And so, I think I feel like that lesson, that's sort of a theme through my life. And it's interesting because going back to the part of You Don't Know About Me where we talk about hearing about the solution, right? Because we're in this world now that we hear a lot of ranting, we hear a lot of people complaining, and we have people, coming to the plate with, things that have happened in their life, which is great. But if you don't share the progress, if you don't share the determination and what it took to get over that and how you got through that, I don't know that we're not doing anyone any favors. Then it doesn't matter because we're just saying, like, let's just rant.
Totally.
Right? So really, it's amazing to see the kids recognizing that when they share the progress, that's when people, again, right, say, oh, that happened to me as well. Here's what I did. And then we have a group of leaders as opposed to a group of kind of moaning and groaning and.
Yeah, that's so good. It's so good. And I want to, I mean, yeah, I'm like, talk about this, talk about that. One story I want you to share because I think this is just, I mean, in addition to everything, right? It's so good. And that is getting the domain ambition.org.
Oh,
Please,
God.
please, if you could share that story, because I think that also speaks to the learning and really just the power behind what you're doing with ambition and what's, what these students are actually, taking, right? And how it's empowering them for the future.
I'm so glad you love that story.
I love that story.
So I started the program. I had a different name, and then one day, I thought, this program is about ambition. In fact, and even then, I had people say, "Oh, ambition's a dirty word." And I said, "It's not to me, and it's not to my group, and we need this program to be called Ambition because it's about constantly striving." So, of course, I go ambition.org, and of course, the domain is taken. So I sent an email and I said, hey, I'd love to find out how I can acquire this domain. And he said, oh, it's the gentleman, his name is Bob. He writes me back. He said, it's $25,000. I said, okay. I said, well, we're a nonprofit. And I knew that when he read the word nonprofit, the first thing he's thinking is, oh, fantastic. And I said, so he said, so what's your budget? I said, we don't have one. You tell me what, like, is that it? 25, is that it? And he said, yeah. Well, and then he started asking some questions. And I said, look, I have an idea. Why don't you, and he lives on the East Coast. I said, why don't you fly out to LA, meet my students, you tell them what it costs. And if it costs $25K, we're going to have to figure out a way for them to earn $25K to buy your domain. And he says, okay. So he flies, like all sight unseen. He flies to LA, he comes to class, and he tells the kids it's going to be $25,000. And actually, he and I had dinner the night before, and he kept saying, well, just give me a budget, give me a budget. I said, we honestly don't have one, but we are going to get this domain, whatever it takes. And I said, so negotiate with the students the same way you would negotiate with me or any business owner. He says, okay. So he comes to class and he tells the story, and he talks a lot about, teaching someone how to fish. And he talks about his background, which was not easy. And and then he eventually got to a point where he bought a number of domains, and which everyone was doing at that point. So he tells the kids, and we literally spend from September to or October to the springtime negotiating with him. We actually get someone into class who's amazing and works with the kids on how to negotiate. We'd go on to Zoom with Bob, and we went back and forth and back and forth. And now he's getting to know the kids, and this all goes back to when they know you, it's very, very different. And Mia is now our spokesperson. And the last day of class, she gets on to Zoom with him. And she said, okay, Bob, this is the deal. We are willing to pay, or can pay $5,000. And it's going to be a payment plan. We don't know how long it'll take. But we will also have a scholarship fund that is, you'll be reflective in all of the scholarships the students get in perpetuity of the program. And while she's talking, we hear a ding, and he sends an email and he says, you got it. It took us years to pay for it. Then the craziest thing is he's a marathoner, and he wants to do a marathon in every country. The one marathon he can't get into is Boston. My first job out of college was the race director of the Boston Marathon. So I call him. He said, look, we can't just get people in, but there may be a charity bib opportunity. So long story short, and the kids are just still amazed after that we got the domain for $5,000. And while we're in the middle of trying to pay for that, we then offer Bob Deemer, I find out that we can get him a charity bib, and what it's going to take, which is he has to pay raise $3,000 for this charity. We offer to raise it for him. So we raise the money while we owe him this other money, and Bob Deemer gets into the Boston Marathon. And then he gets on Zoom with the kids, and he shares the whole experience. And seeing all that full circle. So now we've hit layers of kids. We have our first kids who got him down to the $5,000. Now we got to give something to him. And what these kids saw is not just like what you can do when you put your mind to it, but all the legs that come from that.
For sure.
And so the day he crossed that finish line just really put this, honestly, 6-7 year story to bed.
That's amazing. I love that whole story. And I think it's so cool because I think it like embodies so much of, what you do and what this is all about too. Um, so I love that. Thank you for going there and sharing that. I wanted to, before we wrap up, I think one of the big things that I feel like within, your journey and kind of, where you are now and where you're going in this perseverance is that, to really like things don't happen overnight. And I think that that's a big takeaway for people. And, for those who, I think something that often can hold us back is thinking like, I want to try this thing, but maybe it's too late for me to do this, right? Or that time has kind of passed, or I don't know how to get started, or what are people going to think, or all of these like limiting beliefs that we have, or reasons why we don't try that thing. And also just living in this like performance culture and instant gratification, and I have to do this and tomorrow it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to give up. So I think that happens a lot. And I think, your story and tomorrow being 25 years of JAMAH, like that's amazing. And that over time, that consistency over time and that perseverance, I think it's something that is truly inspiring. So what is your advice to people who, either if you're an entrepreneur or just want to start something, new endeavor, what's your encouragement there?
I think it's really important to remember, and it sounds so trivial and trite, right, to say it's about the journey, but it really is about the journey. Like right now, when people say, "Would you do it differently?" I mean, now that, things like literally 23 years before I started seeing, like that you could say that we were sort of on the map. I loved all of it. In fact, when people say, well, when you love what you do, it's not work. The truth is, it's totally work, but I don't know why we aren't loving work and productivity. And I realize, gosh, if I can build something and I can ultimately, like, I can watch the progress of it, how amazing is that? And so I feel like there needs to be a mind shift where we're not, this idea that if you love what you do, it won't feel like work. I don't know that, like, for me, that's not the goal. The goal is to love the work and to not have to call it something else. For and sure. I mean, I work 18, 20 hours a day. My husband's the same way, and people say, oh, you work too much. And I always think, why is that working too much? And I know we're in these years that we talk about work-life balance. So that I think the advice I would give is, I'm much more of a believer in work-life blend. And so, the people I work with have become my friends I've started to work with. It's all sort of one ball of wax. And I feel like when we can just embrace that and say the goal is to love my life every day, whether I'm, off, on some amazing island, whether I'm taking a hike or whether I'm sitting at my desk working. And so I feel like that's a big shift we have to take. And I think we have to get back to remembering about the joy of hard work, what it means to work your tail off and make a buck and get to spend it any way you want. To remember that money is an amazing tool. So for me, the that tool can help us run ambition, and so then even then we've kind of blended JAMAH and ambition in the sense of everybody who works for JAMAH does some kind of volunteering for ambition. But I think it starts with this mind shift that our duty is to just love our lives. And to not, at some point, right, you get off the seesaw and it goes one way or the other. So for me personally, this is striving for balance. That's not intuitive for me. Blending everything together, that sits with me.
I love that. It's so good. So much wisdom and insight, and I really appreciate it, and just you being here. And I feel like my my, my jaw hurts because I've been smiling this whole time.
See, we haven't been sad.
I mean, right? Look, I got
Try it.
now.
It
I
doesn't
think of
work.
you. I got this little bracelet from Vlad that has a little smiley face on it, and it's such a reminder every day. You know, you look at it and like, well, all
Yeah.
right, but it does. It's such a shift. No, thank you so much for being here and joining me and sharing all of this. And it's amazing, you know. And I feel so, like I said, like I just feel so lucky and honored to head, you know, have the opportunity to have met you and now, you know, call you my friend. So, so thanks so much.
I'm so grateful for my first introduction to Vlad. It's so funny, right? Like one minute I have that introduction, all of a sudden I'm in Florida, and now I have a new friend.
Yeah,
And
I
you
told
are
Vlad.
so inspiring yourself.
Oh, thank you. No, but yeah, I was like, when we got off the phone the first time, I texted Vlad, I was like, oh my gosh, I love Nancy Gale. She's amazing.
Oh, it's so sweet. It's so
Oh,
sweet. I realize though I have to send him a little love, right?
yeah,
We've kind of knocked him out of the loop.
I know. I told him he's cooking dinner right now.
Oh, good,
So
good, as he
yeah, he's
should
like,
be.
yeah, you're gonna go chat with Nancy, and I'm gonna be in the kitchen cooking. And I'm like, well, you know what?
It sounds right.
It's right. It
It
works for both
does,
of us.
yes.
So I said, you know, I'll tell her that you said hi. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been
Thank
amazing.
you. So
All right.
fantastic. Thank you.